Second important part of production scheduling is you actually develop the finish dates of all your work orders. Most of the times people promise delivery of orders based on a fixed lead time. The marketing department keeps going outside and saying that we are a 21-day lead time company. They are totally disconnected from what is the order booking or for how many days your resources are booked. This is another place where production scheduling comes into play. Now you are constantly failing to deliver on time for whatever reasons, but that has changed the priority of your customers. Many times we do not know the final effect on other deliveries when we reshuffle. In one way, we allow the production in charge to get away with murder when we change the priority, because then he cannot be held responsible for anything after that. We know that the capacity has been booked, and if I reshuffle one, the impact of that shuffling of sequence cannot be very easily seen by naked eye. Again, production scheduling provides you the effect of any shuffle on the schedule. If because of late delivery there is a change in priority and that leads to shuffling of the schedule, you can be very well certain that now these many orders will be late. This is the second important aspect of production scheduling. So basically it is taking inputs from all departments, processing you and giving you information which can then be dissipated to your departments and your customers. However, there are stages to production scheduling. As mentioned in the principles of flow, we have to make sure that the material flows smoothly at the most constrained resources. One step before production scheduling is capacity planning. It is at this stage that we make sure that we do not overload the resources. However, capacity planning is also that stage which tells us the amount of load coming on each resources against their capacity. So if I take a demand for a period, convert that into the load coming on my resources, I get to see where a few of my resources have been loaded more than the capacity, or which are the resources which are loaded less than the capacity. It is at this stage we find out the more constrained and the less constrained, as guided by the principles of flow. Now, when we have identified this, we know where to focus on. So our scheduling will be in detail on the constrained resources. Now, what is the essential difference between capacity planning and finite capacity scheduling? Capacity planning tells you that your resources are loaded by 20% more. But finite capacity scheduling tells you that your order ABC 1, 2, 3 is going to be late by 5 days. This information is more important than understanding that one of your capacity is overloaded or you're falling short of capacity on a particular resource. what is the impact of the shortage of this capacity will be actually seen in your deliveries. Now, as I said that we do finite capacity scheduling for a much shorter horizon and a capacity planning for a longer horizon. So if you're looking at, let us say, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, or maybe 4 months ahead in your capacities, it allows you to focus on your tactical move. That means if you're getting more orders which are not properly loading or overloading certain resources, you can decide to outsource or maybe change the process of manufacturing way ahead in advance and then use that process in production scheduling. However, production scheduling is not a simple task. It has got so many dimensions and so many iterations possible, and it is so minute in detailing that it can be strenuous. But a majority, or we can gain a lot from just going up to capacity planning. Because in capacity planning, we are able to identify which are my resources which are overloaded and which are not. I can then say that all the items which are overloading my capacity, that means if I have to balance the capacity and the load, or to what we call as leveling, what we call leveling is leveling the excessive demand on my resources, I can then go back and tell the customers that it is not going to be possible for me to deliver this on time that you are asking for. Because if you want to defer your delivery, yes, I have the capacity. But if you want it in the same time period, I am overloading my resources. Capacity planning is used for a tactical move. Then, after we have found this, we start focusing on where to do production scheduling. And the reason why I say this is, you don't have to look at all the resources in detail. First, make sure that you have spotted the constrained resources and scheduled them properly. This is what the principles of flow are telling me. So, principles of flow, when combined with production scheduling, are simplifying my task. I don't need to go into a sophisticated tool of production scheduling to make sure that I get the most robust thing, and still I don't know whether it's the best schedule possible. So principles of flow help us focus and quickly come to what needs to be done. So I have separated the ones which are non-constrained from the ones which are constrained. I take the constraint and I do a detailed finite capacity scheduling on that. Based on this finite capacity, now I know I am making sure that the constrained resource gets properly used. And when I say properly used, that means all the priorities, sequencing of materials flowing through the system get decided by this schedule. Now, this is feasible. And this feasible schedule gets communicated to the customer better. And since it is feasible, there's quite high chance that you will not be reshuffling your priorities and hence not losing out on your due date performances. Production scheduling is that tool again which can actually add to nearly 10% in your bottom line if utilized and done very well. Now, how do we go about using the laid down rules for production scheduling? To do effective production scheduling, the company needs to maintain certain amounts of data. The American Inventory Control and Production Society has defined these data. The core are bill of material, routing and demand. Demand is something for which you have a firm order of. You can mix this firm order with your forecasting, but you should be very clear which one is forecasting and which one is firm order. Because if something has to be knocked off to level the demand, it should be the forecasting part. The most important amongst all these three is the bill of material. This bill of material has to be as precise as possible, and it should be updated as much as possible, because it is through this bill of material the maximum amount of information required for running a company can be got. There are two kinds of bill of material. One is called the purchasing bill of material, and the second is called the manufacturing bill of material. The purchasing bill of material is nothing but it's got the content of all the raw materials or bought out components that need to be purchased if we have to produce one product. The essential difference between this and the manufacturing bill of material is the manufacturing bill of material is tiered. That means it tells you what raw material gets converted into which component goes into which subassembly, and which subassembly goes into which product. And at all these levels, what all bought out components are required. So manufacturing bill of material also sort of sets the priority in which the product will be manufactured. Naturally, you cannot start manufacturing a subassembly if you have not manufactured the component. So bill of material is that part, that heart and soul of a manufacturing company, which if put in nicely and simply can actually reduce the cost of operations of a company tremendously. So we need this bill of material. And then the third thing I said was the routing part. Routing is nothing but a sheet that contains the sequence in which the operations will be performed for producing a product. After having the sequence in place, we also go and say at which stage, that means at which operating machine will that operation be done. That means if I have to do a certain operation, which operating center or machining center will I send it to? And after having specified that, I will also write the most important figure called the standard time in which this will be processed on that machine. This makes the routing. The biggest change in information technology or softwares that made all these systems effective for use was when we were able to combine the routing with bill of material. The technology which made it possible also opened the huge door for finite capacity scheduling and an effective use of software in production manufacturing. You can have a high-end sophisticated system, advanced production scheduling or a high-end ERP, or you can do the same thing by using Excel on a desktop. But all these things do not violate the good old principles laid down in 1960s or early 70s by American Production and Inventory Control Society. The computers just helped us do it faster. Okay. So if you are getting into production scheduling, these are the building blocks. Now, once you have the machines or the work centers, you need to detail them. So there is a need of you organizing your machines in work centers and the numbers and the efficiencies. Another part that needs to be put into place if you want still better accuracy is the calendar. Calendar sort of just tells you that for how many minutes in a day or in a period is the machine available for working. Breakdowns not included, but by your contract, is it off on Sundays or Saturdays? Will it work 24 hours or will it have lunch breaks? All these things are put in the calendar, and when the calendar gets attached to a machine, it tells you for how many hours in a day is that machine available. So now, by using these 3 to 4 elements, we go about doing production scheduling. Like I said earlier, production scheduling, finite capacity scheduling is the core. Now, after I have scheduled based on the inputs, I know the rate of manufacturing, I know which machine our item is going to go to, and I know the quantity which is based on demand. I will be able to achieve the first step, which says that what is the load against capacity that I have for the whole period. Production scheduling is one way of looking into the future of the utilization of resources. It also helps in synchronizing the material purchase. It also helps in predicting the date on which we expect a stock out of the material lying in a store. But this is the planning part, which is going to look into the future and guide us how should we synchronize our material. But this does not mean that this is how we manage our production. When we come to management of production or manufacturing management, there are many behavior patterns, reports, and measures that guide us in knowing where we are as per the plan. Most of the manufacturing operations manage production in a very complex way. Though, when you ask how do you manage your production, they explain very clearly. They say, we do certain activities. Those activities are the responsibility of departments of the company, and we tell each department that this is your key result area. And if all my departments work and achieve their KRA, we will have the perfect output, or we can then stick to our plan of meeting the due dates as well as meet the financial performances. Now, this is the place where we tell ourselves that we are going to break our company down into small parts, and we are going to then measure the performances of individual parts, hoping that the sum of the individual performances will be the sum of the whole. In other words, we say that we are looking at reduction in variance. Are manufacturing operations complex, and is it really very complicated to manage such organizations?